Why don't you just admit it, Lana? You're a failure, my brother Ethan said, flashing that smug grin as he leaned back in his chair. His voice was sharp enough to cut through the awkward silence at the family dinner table. Forks froze. My mother looked down at her plate like she didn't hear anything. My aunt giggled behind her wine glass. Then Ethan added with a laugh, "You walk dogs for a living." Dogs, Lana. Meanwhile, I'm managing million-dollar accounts in Manhattan. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us what would you do in this situation? Be honest, tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin. Everyone laughed. Even my cousin Julia, who still lived with her parents and barely passed community college, smirked like she was suddenly royalty. I just sat there, breathing quietly, gripping my fork tighter under the table. My knuckles went white, but I didn't say anything. Not yet. Not when the people I called family were busy making me the punchline. Ethan looked proud of himself. You know, it's honestly embarrassing. You're almost 30, Lana. And what do you have to show for it? No degree. No house. No fiancé. Not even a real job. The worst part? My mom said nothing. She always did that, stayed silent when Ethan took his shots at me. She used to say, "Don't take it personally, sweetie. He just wants you to do better." But how is humiliation supposed to help me do better? Anyway, Ethan continued, swirling his glass of Merlot, if you ever want to upgrade from scraping by in leggings and sneakers, I could always ask my boss if there's a receptionist position open. I'm sure he'd love a good laugh. I swallowed hard. My chest burned. I wasn't angry. No, I was past anger. But before I could open my mouth, the doorbell rang. Everyone looked toward the front of the house. Aunt Michelle whispered, "Who could that be at this hour?" Mom stood, awkwardly brushing crumbs off her sweater. I wasn't expecting anyone. The doorbell rang again, this time more firmly. "I'll get it," I said, calmly rising to my feet. Ethan chuckled. "Careful, Lana. Don't trip over your worthlessness on the way there." Laughter again. But I was already walking. My heart pounded. I knew who was behind that door. When I opened it, the warm yellow light from the chandelier spilled out into the cool night. And standing there, in a crisp charcoal suit that looked custom-tailored, with that signature quiet confidence only money could buy, was Grayson Maddox, my brother's billionaire boss. My husband. "Evening," Grayson said, smiling down at me. His voice always carried that magnetic weight. He held out a small box wrapped in gold paper. "Sorry I'm late, sweetheart. Traffic was hell." I took the box without saying a word. Behind me, I could feel the silence in the dining room choking the air. Then Grayson looked past me, into the house. He stepped inside. My mom stood frozen in the hallway, hands clutched together like she couldn't decide if she should scream or curtsy. Ethan blinked. "Mr. Maddox?" Grayson gave him a polite nod. "Ethan. Good to see you again. Didn't know you were related to my wife." The room collapsed into silence. Aunt Michelle nearly dropped her wine. Julia's fork clanged against her plate. Even my dad, who barely looked up when I arrived, was now standing like a statue. I looked at Ethan. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came. I walked back into the room with Grayson beside me. And then I smiled, not the kind you give when you're happy. The kind you give when you've just won. "I hope dinner's still warm," I said softly. "I told Grayson all about your lovely cooking, Mom." And Ethan, Grayson's been so excited to meet the family you kept telling him about in meetings. Grayson put an arm around me and kissed my temple. "She's always been my peace," he said gently. "You should be proud." Ethan looked like someone had punched the air out of his lungs. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Ethan still hadn't sat down. His fingers twitched on the edge of his chair, eyes bouncing between me and Grayson like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. He looked betrayed, threatened, and small, so much smaller than he ever wanted to feel. Grayson gave him that patient, composed look billionaires have mastered, the kind that says, "I've already won. You just don't know it yet." "So," Grayson said, loosening his tie just a touch, "what were you all talking about before I came in?" I let that question hang in the air. My mom cleared her throat. Just family updates. You know how dinner conversations go. Grayson chuckled, then gently pulled out a chair for me like the gentleman he always was. I sat. Ethan still hadn't moved. "You're married?" he asked, finally breaking his silence. I looked right at him.
Yes.
"For 7 months." He blinked hard.
No.
You couldn't have, I would have known." "No," I said flatly. "You wouldn't have. Because I didn't want you to." I let the words hit him like a slap. Mom spoke next, her voice thin. "Lana, why didn't you tell us? We're your family." I stared at her. "You only show up when there's gossip or judgment. Not love." That shut her up. Ethan sat down slowly, his whole body tense. "So, what? This was some kind of revenge? You married my boss just to humiliate me?" Grayson looked at him calmly. "You think Lana would go through a life commitment just to get back at you? That's a pretty self-centered view, Ethan." Ethan turned red. "You don't know what she's like. You see some perfect version of her." "I see the real her," Grayson said, and for the first time, his voice carried weight. "The woman who stayed up with me during 3 a.m. board calls. The woman who walks abandoned dogs during the rain because no one else shows up. The one who chose her passion, even when it didn't come with praise or a 6-figure salary." He looked around the table. "I see the woman none of you took the time to actually know." A heavy silence. Then my dad spoke for the first time. "So, what's your plan now, Lana? You gonna play house in his penthouse and rub it in everyone's face?" I stared at him.
No.
"I'm going to keep doing what I do. Except now, I don't have to explain myself to people who never respected me in the first place." Grayson reached over and gently took my hand. "We didn't come here to boast. We came here because Lana wanted to give her family one more chance. She said maybe, just maybe, tonight would be different." I looked around at every face. I was wrong. Ethan slammed his fist on the table. "I busted my ass to get into that company. You're telling me my dog-walking sister is now sleeping in the CEO's bed? That's not fair." I stood slowly. "You want to talk about fairness? You humiliated me in front of the people who should have protected me. You laughed at my work, at my life, for years. You stripped me of dignity like it was a game." I paused, then said it clear. "And the man you look up to, the one who signs your checks? He looks at me with more respect than my own brother ever did." Then came the blow. Grayson said casually, "By the way, Ethan, about that promotion you asked for?" Ethan's face lit up for half a second. Grayson's expression hardened. "It's a no. Effective immediately." "You're firing me?" Ethan's voice cracked.
No.
"I'm promoting someone else. You'll stay, just no upward path for now. Maybe next time you'll think twice before mocking people who work hard with heart." My brother's mouth fell open, but no words came. He sat there, silent, humiliated, and powerless. Just like I used to be. 6 months earlier. It was raining the night I met Grayson Maddox. I was halfway through my 3rd dog walk, soaked to the bone, hoodie clinging to my skin, when I saw him standing under the awning outside a luxury building in Tribeca. Not the kind of man you'd expect to meet on a stormy sidewalk. He looked like he'd walked straight out of a GQ cover, tall, sharp-jawed, holding an umbrella, but clearly uninterested in using it. His driver hadn't shown.
His phone was dead.
And he looked oddly stuck. "Need help?" I'd asked without thinking. He turned. His gray eyes scanned me, then the 6 dogs behind me, all wearing matching neon raincoats. And he smiled. "Depends. You offering?" I chuckled. "Only if you want to share my umbrella and squeeze into the F train with me and a Labrador who hates thunder." He ended up walking with me for 5 blocks. No umbrella. No pretense. Just conversation.
Real. Easy.
That night, I didn't know his last name. He told me his name was just Grayson. Said he worked in finance. I didn't press. He, however, asked everything about me. I told him I'd dropped out of NYU after Mom got sick. That I took care of rescue dogs. That I liked writing poetry, but was too scared to publish anything. He listened like it mattered. A week later, I got a flower delivery at my apartment, 6 white roses and a note. For the girl who braved the storm and made me want to get drenched.
G.
From there, it snowballed. Late night walks, rooftop dinners, secret weekends upstate. Always quiet. Always just us. When I finally found out who he really was, Grayson Maddox, CEO of Maddox and Rowe Capital, I nearly passed out in his penthouse. You lied, I'd whispered. No, he'd said gently. I hid. Because for the first time, someone was talking to me, not my money. He proposed 3 months later. On a pier in Brooklyn, under string lights and the scent of street tacos in the air. But I didn't tell my family. I knew what they'd say. Gold digger. Lucky.
Fake.
So, we kept it between us. Until last night. Until Ethan took it too far. Back to the present. Ethan stormed out halfway through dessert. Mom kept pretending the mashed potatoes needed more butter. Dad mumbled something about needing a smoke. But I knew the damage was done. After everyone left, I sat on the porch swing outside, barefoot, the night cool against my skin. Grayson came up behind me, gently draping his jacket around my shoulders. You okay? He asked softly. I don't know. He sat beside me, pulling me into his side. I meant what I said in there. You're the most grounded, brilliant woman I know. I looked at him. They'll never respect me. Then stop waiting for them to. I rested my head on his chest. It still hurts. I know, he whispered. But pain has a way of building your armor. I didn't speak for a moment. Then I said, I want to stop hiding. I want people to know the truth. Not just about us, but about what I've been through. What I've survived. His grip tightened. Then we stopped hiding. The next morning, I posted our wedding photo online with a caption. To everyone who said I was a failure, meet the man who sees my worth when you never did. My inbox exploded.
So did my brothers.
His coworkers. His girlfriend. His pride. And that was just the beginning. Because what they didn't know was that I wasn't done. Not even close. Ethan's hands shook as he slammed his laptop shut. He'd just read the news headline, splashed across every major finance blog and LinkedIn thread like a wildfire. Grayson Maddox announces new co-chair of Maddox and Rowe, his wife, Lana Maddox. Not dog walker. Not unemployed sister. Not failure.
Company. Chair.
He tried to call Grayson. No answer. He tried texting me. I left him on read. The whole firm was whispering.
He knew it.
From the second he walked into the building, his coworkers were looking at him like he was radioactive. The girl he mocked in front of his entire family now had authority over him. Worse, he knew what was coming next because I had proof. Flashback to 2 weeks earlier. I was in Grayson's office when I first stumbled across the internal file. I hadn't meant to. He was in a meeting, and I just stopped by to drop off lunch and wait for him. His assistant had let me in. The folder was left open on his screen. Proposed layoffs Q3, under Ethan Maddox recommendations. My brother. He'd submitted a list of employees to be cut, including Grayson's longtime secretary, Javier, who had stage 2 cancer, and a single mom who'd just returned from maternity leave. He'd written next to their names. Emotionally taxing employees.
Low ROI.
Replace with fresh hires.
Cold.
Heartless.
Strategic.
And Grayson hadn't seen the note yet. His assistant had printed the wrong draft for the executive review. I quietly forwarded the email to myself. And I waited. Back to now. At 11:03 a.m. sharp, I entered the main boardroom at Maddox and Rowe, wearing a crisp white power suit, my heels silent, expression calm. Grayson was already seated at the head of the table. A dozen senior executives waited, confused, murmuring among themselves. Morning, everyone, I said, setting my files down. I know this isn't a traditional meeting, but it's important. I pulled out the printed list. Before we proceed with Ethan Maddox's restructuring plan, there's something I need to share. I passed the document around the table. As they read, jaws began to clench. When I got to Javier, I looked him in the eyes. You're not being laid off. He blinked. Ma'am, you've given this company 18 years. You're the soul of this place. You're staying. He looked down quickly, glassy-eyed. I turned to the room. If anyone thinks my appointment is ceremonial, let this be clear, I know this company. I've walked its halls for months. I've seen who works and who weaponizes power. We are not building success on the backs of loyalty. Grayson leaned back, his eyes proud. Silent. I continued. Effective immediately, Ethan Maddox is being reassigned to an advisory role. No executive decision-making authority. No team leadership. Grayson finally spoke. Lana's leading the culture restructuring moving forward. You answer to her now. The room fell completely quiet. No pushback. No snickers. No whispers of nepotism. Because deep down they knew Ethan had earned this. And I'd been underestimated long enough. Later that night, Ethan showed up at our apartment building. Security called up, asking if we'd allow him access. Grayson looked at me. I nodded. Let him up. Ethan stormed in 20 minutes later, face flushed with humiliation and desperation. You planned this, he spat. You set me up. You used Grayson to get revenge. I stayed calm.
No.
I didn't use anyone. I became someone. You don't belong in that chair. You never belonged in it either, I said. You just bullied your way in. He clenched his fists. I made one mistake. No. I cut in. You made a lifetime of them. You thought kindness was weakness. You thought humility was failure. You mocked people like me because we weren't polished or powerful. But guess what, Ethan? I stepped closer. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it walks dogs in the rain, listens more than it speaks, and waits until the moment is right. He left that night with nothing more to say. And for the first time, I didn't cry after a confrontation. I slept like a queen. The media didn't take long to catch on. The story of Grayson Maddox's wife was once a dog walker. Now she's running his empire, lit up every headline from Forbes to BuzzFeed. Paparazzi began hanging around the Maddox building entrance. Some photos showed me holding Grayson's hand, smiling as we entered meetings. Others caught me alone, on my way to work, no bodyguards, in jeans and a backpack, refusing to let glamour swallow who I really was. But none of those photos captured the storm brewing underneath. Because while the world cheered, my family stayed quiet. No calls. No texts. No apologies. Not even from my mom. One morning, 2 weeks after Ethan's demotion, I got an email from our family group chat. Subject: Family brunch this Sunday, Grandma's house.
I stared at it.
I didn't want to go.
But I needed to.
Not for them. For me. Sunday morning, Grayson offered to come with me. I said no. This is something I need to do alone. He nodded, kissed my forehead, and said, remember who you are in that room. Don't let them shrink you. I drove to Grandma's house in silence. When I walked through the door, everyone was already there. Ethan looked up and then looked away. Mom forced a smile. Dad didn't even bother. I stayed standing. No hugs. No hellos. Just silence. Until Grandma broke it. She stood up, all 85 pounds of sass and steel in her floral cardigan, and said, well, it's about time someone in this family put Ethan in his place. Everyone turned. She looked at me. You did good, Lana. You made me proud. My chest tightened. That's all I'd ever wanted to hear. I walked to her, hugged her tightly, then turned to the room. I'm not staying long. But I wanted to say something. The clinking of forks paused. I spent years sitting in this house being laughed at.
Dismissed.
Called a burden. Called a joke. You mocked my job, my choices, my clothes, my silence. And I took it. Every single time. Because I believed that maybe one day you'd see me. I looked at Ethan. You never did. And now you don't get to. Then at Mom. You had every chance to defend me. But you kept your mouth shut while your son tore me down. She looked like she might cry. But I wasn't here for her tears. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done waiting for people to love me the way I needed to be loved. I started to walk away, then stopped at the door. Oh, and Ethan? I turned slowly. Next time you call someone a failure, make sure you're not speaking to your future boss. I left without looking back. 3 months later, Ethan quietly resigned from Maddox and Rowe. Word got out that he'd been blocked from promotion again twice. Grayson never spoke a word against him. He didn't have to. The numbers spoke for themselves. Employee morale soared. Loyalty deepened. Lana Maddox had reshaped the company culture. And she did it with empathy, not ego. One afternoon, I found a letter slipped under my office door. It was from Ethan. I deserved it. All of it. You showed me what real strength looks like. Not money. Not titles. Just grace under fire.
I'm sorry.
Not asking for forgiveness. Just telling the truth. I kept the letter. Didn't respond. Not out of cruelty, but out of closure. Because some apologies are only meant to be read,
Not relived.
and me? I never stopped walking dogs. On weekends, I still volunteered at the same rescue shelter where I'd found my first paycheck. But now I did it in boots that cost more than my first car, with a heart that weighed less than it ever had before. Because the truth is, I never needed revenge. I just needed to rise and let the silence around me echo with regret. And that's exactly what I did.